last year that Professor Professor Chandra had come from this esteemed university to address our students here. This time we are extremely happy to introduce Professor Nilanjana Gupta, who has been associated with Jadavpur University for the last 30 years. Professor Nilanjana Gupta is a very esteemed scholar, a multifaceted academician, because I remember she is here in Kerala as a part of her UGC research project on education. To be precise, she is working on a specific project called Islam and Education. So she is here in Kerala for a week. So it's a part of that project work that we requested her to address the faculty and students of our university and share with us her thoughts on a very important aspect of our lives, which is education. But that is not the only discipline that Professor Nilanjana Gupta has been associated with or has distinguished herself in. I distinctly remember reading quite a long time back a pioneering book that she wrote on television studies, which was called Switching Channels. It was a path-breaking book. Television studies was just catching up in India, and it was a very noted, highly noted and much reviewed, much discussed book. And apart from television studies, she's also been editing books on performance studies, and a very important book that has come out recently is Dance Matters. So from that to education. So I just wanted to bring to your attention the kind of wide variety of subjects in which Nilanjana has been kind of dabbling, and I wouldn't say dabbling even, has been going very deep into and coming out with some very important research works in that area. Today, she is going to talk to us on value of education and education with value, looking at the history of education in India. I think it's a very vital and important topic because we are all in the race to become educated in India. In Kerala particularly, education is a passport to success, to a good social life, to a great, successful, happy life. That's what we all get educated for. But what exactly does this education mean to us? What is the value of education? What is its history? How did it emerge? These are the things which we don't much talk about. We take education for granted. So this is a kind of a self-reflexive kind of a topic, and with great pleasure and anticipation, I invite Professor Nilanjana Gupta to talk to us.
If you remember that, maybe many of you are not old enough to remember, but that was the time when in India there was a series of very unfortunate and very tragic incidents which began with the demolition of the Babri Masjid, which led to communal riots and tensions all over the country. And all of us were very disturbed about what was happening and why it was happening. Now, interestingly, some of you may know that Calcutta itself is a city which has seen a lot of violence related to religious communities from the 19th century onwards. And also one of the impacts of the partition of India was that there was a huge transfer of population from West Bengal into what was then East Pakistan and now is Bangladesh. So there was a huge migration on both sides. Many people lost their homes. My own family comes from Dhaka, and many of us actually have come from families which were displaced during the partition and they had to start life all over again when they came into Calcutta. And similarly in Dhaka and in Bangladesh as well, there was a whole displacement. And there was, until 1964, which was the last major riot between Hindus and Muslims in Calcutta, there was a lot of tension, there was a lot of mistrust, disbelief among the two communities that lived side by side for so long. But since then, we must say that one of the things that has happened in West Bengal is that there has been no major incident at all. There have been some isolated incidents perhaps, but since then there has been no major incidents. Communities have learned to accept each other and have lived side by side with no And even the 90s, there was no impact as such in Bengal on, even though many other states in the country were actually very disturbed at that time. So the UGC team said something very interesting. They said that, what happens with academics, when there's an incident, after that we all go and study why it happened. Why was there violence? Okay, this will happen, then so-and-so said this, then so-and-so did that. So we analyze after the event. But it is also important to analyze why something does not happen. It is as important to see why something happens and why something doesn't happen. So we want to know why in Bengal, which had a history of such violence, why now there is no such violence. We want to know the reasons. And they gave us a list of topics that they wanted us to look at. And at that time, if you remember, there was a lot of debate in Parliament as well about madrasas, the role of madrasas. Advani, who was then a senior member of Parliament, had said all madrasas should be closed down because they are all fostering terrorism. Some other people were also making those kind of comments, and there was a whole debate about this whole relationship between madrasa education and terrorism, and many articles were being written and this was happening. So initially I was requested to look at the madrasa system in Bengal, because we have had this madrasa system for a very long time. Some of you may be aware that the Calcutta Madrasa was actually set up by Warren Hastings in 1789, as far as I remember the date. And it was set up by Warren Hastings, and that was the first so-called modern madrasa, so we can call it. And it still continues today. It has a very large repository of books and manuscripts and so on. They also have teaching programs even today. And we tend to, so that is of course one, but apart from that, of course, there are many other madrasas which have been running for a very long time. And one of the things that I don't want to get into too much detail here, because that was something that I did, and one thing that we found was that first of all, the whole idea of the madrasa was something that many of us are not very aware of. We don't know what goes on in a madrasa, what the history of madrasa education is, the contemporary history of madrasa education. Many of us are not very aware of that, and there is almost like a kind of this word has now become a very loaded word. It's become a word which has so much meaning sort of attached to it, which in most cases is completely wrong, of course. And so I was exploring the ways in which this happened. But one thing that what I would like to just talk about today, rather than the specifics of that particular research or what I'm trying to do now, which I will ask, I'm happy to answer questions if you have any particular questions on this research. But one thing that I began to realize is that in India we have a kind of official history of modern education, which says that the British came and they established the three big universities, University of Calcutta, University of Madras, University of Bombay, and before that we had no education systems in India, and that they are responsible for setting up the whole educational system, and they brought education to India. This is the kind of history that we see when we read the history of education in India. But actually looking at this, several things actually I think we need to rethink and rewrite this whole idea of the way in which modern education actually happened in India. I just want to start with my own university, which is Jadavpur University in the south part of Calcutta. If you look at it, at the official documents, you'll find it's the official date of establishment is 1956. But if you look at the history of the institution, it is actually an institution that started in 1905, and then it was called the National Council of Education. And the people who started this National Council of Education were all people who were part of the freedom movement, the nationalist movement of the time. One of the first meetings that took place in the space that is now our university, which then used to be a kind of pleasure house for a local zamindar in the outskirts of the city. He used to go there and spend his weekends there, possibly, enjoying himself. But the first meeting was held there. People like Rabindranath Tagore and many of the other major nationalist leaders of the time were all there. And they decided that India is going to be free soon. One day or the other, maybe it will take time, but India is going to be free. And India is not prepared for freedom. In the sense that there is Calcutta University, where Calcutta University teaches people only to be good, administrators and clerks. They teach them only how to, write notes and do hisab and things like that. But there is no institution in India which produces engineers, which produces scientists, which produces technicians. So in an independent India, we need people who are going to build India, who are going to build the bridges, who are going to build the roads, who are going to be the scientists. So we will start a college of engineering, they called it at that time, because our independent India needs engineers and we will fund that. So all these people donated, somebody donated land, somebody donated 5 lakh rupees, which was a lot of money in those days. Other people donated, various other kinds of things to the National Council of Education. And Tagore has this very wonderful speech where he says that independent India should not only look at engineers and scientists, but an independent India also needs people who will look at history, culture, literature. And he has a beautiful speech at this session where he talks about the need to look at literatures in India. That in Bengal we don't know the kind of literature that is being written in Malayalam. We don't know the kind of literature that is being written in other parts of the country. So there also has to be enough interaction between the different literatures, between the cultures and so on. And many people think that speech of Rabindranath's actually became the kernel for what developed as comparative literature later on, because he talks about why it's important to look at not just one literature but many literatures, especially the literatures of India, together as a sort of national literature and things like that. One of the things that this National Council of Education did was that in those days, we hear of many people who went to Oxford to study in the British colonial days, or became lawyers because they went to Lincoln's Inn to study and so on. But if you notice, you never find stories in the pre-independence era of people who went to England to become scientists or technicians, because they were not allowed to. No person from the colony was allowed to become a student in any technical discipline. So one of the things that these nationalist leaders did was they took some very bright students and they actually sponsored them to go to Germany, to go to America sometimes, to learn a subject and come back and then start teaching them. So for example, the chemical engineering department in our university, which is the oldest chemical engineering department in India, was actually started by a young man who was given the money by one of these nationalist leaders. He took a ship, went to Germany. He did not know German. He was tremendous. He came from a relatively poor family. All his expenses were paid by the leader. And he went to Germany and he froze practically to death because it was so cold. Obviously, going from Bengal there, he had a very, very difficult time. He didn't know the language. He didn't eat most of the food that was being produced. I don't know whether any of you have seen the film Ramanujan. If you've seen that, the recent film, several of these kind of issues are also discussed there. But what he did, what he was sent for was to learn chemical engineering. He went to the university there. He came back with a PhD, and he came and he set up the chemical engineering department in what is now Jadavpur University. Similarly, somebody went from electrical engineering, somebody was sent to learn agricultural engineering in America. Various of these people actually, they went and they learned what they were supposed to learn, came back and they started their own classes here. Now, one of the things that happened, of course, was when the British came to know this, they immediately started closing down the classes. They didn't want this technology to be known to the Indians, to the colonials. So every few months or few years, the name of the institution would have to change. So it was originally College of Engineering and Technology. Then it became Bengal College of Engineering. Then it became something else. It kept having to run away and hide. And classes would be held in secret locations all over the city. So it was like a cat and mouse game practically with the British colonial powers. And one of the legacies which we still have is that many of the students also were part of the nationalist movement. So they would often get arrested. They would be in jail for 2-3 years. They would come back, then study for another 2 years. All this was going on. Very, very interesting history itself. And one of the things that we still have in our university is that in many universities you have to keep showing continuity. That what did you do before this? Where were you for 2 years? You have to justify it before you get admission. In our university you have to produce no justification because the original students were often in jail. So you couldn't actually prevent students from joining back after they were in jail and so on. So and of course one of the first principles of what was then the College of Engineering was Aurobindo, Sri, who later became Sri Aurobindo. He was the first principal of the university, of the college then. And so you can imagine that this whole institution grew out of this idea of nationalism, nationalist movement, using knowledge, preparing oneself for a knowledge which will help to build the nation. And the idea of building the nation is both in technology and science and in humanities and culture as well. That in those days, in the initial days, if you were a student of this university, say if I was doing English honors, I would have to do one paper at least on science, on popular science. And all the students of engineering would have to do one paper in either literature or history. So there was this kind of feeling also that there has to be a holistic idea of education, not the kind of specialization that we have today and all that. I think it's interesting because when we look at the history of the institution, then of course after independence, it was trying to become a university. We have some very famous people who taught there as well. For example, Amartya Sen's first job after his PhD was at Jadavpur University. He founded the economics department because he came back from England without a job. He was offered a job. The first Vice Chancellor of our university was also a member of the Kothari Commission and later Union Minister of Education as well, Dr. Tribhuvan Sen. So we have always been very integrated into the whole idea of what constitutes education and what education should be and the relationship between education and society. But what for me is also interesting is that I think that the history of the way the institution was built up has also still left its mark on the way we work as teachers and students today. We still have a very strong commitment to society. One of almost everybody, apart from our own research and our own, sort of writing books and all that, almost all of us have some kind of, what is now called the outreach program going on. For example, our electrical engineering department will go and develop, solar lamps for students, or they will go and work with things like that, so that there is some input into the society as a whole as well. We have, for example, there's this huge afforestation program that goes on by the university in the Sundarbans, which is getting depleted every year. So there's this huge mangrove afforestation that goes on. Many examples of this, I think, still carries on, partly because of this kind of belief that the university is not just for producing very talented students, which of course is part of our mandate, but also that there is something that we have to give back to the society in a way which we have a very strong connection with society. One of the things I do, for example, is that I look after the community radio station that we run. And from that community radio station, we don't pay anybody anything, but we run about 10 hours for programming every day, and it is all produced by local people. We have adopted 3 slums nearby. Many women come from there. We give them some training. They come and they talk about what they need. We facilitate them. I'll give you one example. That we went one of the first places that we went. There's a very large slum there, and we asked them, that we are from the university. We would like to interact with you. We would like to do something with you. So, what is your major problem? So, all of them said that our major problem is there are not enough bathrooms and toilets for women. And this is the major problem because almost all the women work. They go out to work very early in the morning. And we all start fighting amongst ourselves because we are all getting late. This is the number one problem. So what we did was we invited the local councillor and we invited the women, and we had a program on air, on live, where these women told the councillor that please do something about this. We need more toilets, we need more bathrooms. Otherwise we're losing our jobs because we're late going to the job. So the councillor on air, she made a promise saying that yes, in 6 months I'll do something. Give me 6 months time. First 6 months nothing happened. So then again she was invited and interviewed by the same women, and they said, so what have you done for us? Then she sort of said, no, this time I'm serious, I've got money, I'll do it. And actually within 1 year, there were 3 times the number of bathrooms and toilets in that slum, which was a big thing for the women there. So, things like this are things that our university does on a regular basis. I'm just telling you a few of the stories. And I think that it is because of the history of the institution that does this, that we all have this kind of commitment. As I've been going around the country to various institutions and especially to the madrasas as well, one thing that I've seen is that there is no such thing as the madrasa. Madrasas themselves also come in various shapes and sizes and syllabi, and everything is very different. And one of the things that we're trying to look at is to see the history of these madrasa institutions as well. For example, I was talking about Calcutta Madrasa. Calcutta Madrasa, right from the very beginning, has always been a big failure. It has never worked. Part of the reason is, and if you look at the papers, the old papers, you'll find that every 2 years, from 1792 onwards, there's been a commission. A commission has gone to see why it's not working, why something is, no students are there, or no teachers are teaching, or no effective employment is coming out of it. Every 2 years there'll be a committee, and every 2 years they'll make some recommendations, and those will be followed. And then again there'll be another problem, and some of them are very funny also, that the students used to get a stipend, all the madrasa students, from the British. And they say that we went a surprise visit and we found no students in class, no teachers in class also. And then we found them all in the very nearby, there's a very famous prostitute area, we found them all there instead. So immediately the stipend has to be stopped for both the teachers and the students because they are going and spending their time there. And why were they doing that? Because they were getting a stipend which was not a bad stipend. So they knew that as long as they were students, they would go on getting the stipend. The moment they graduated from there, their stipend would stop. So nobody wanted to graduate from that place. So so they said, okay, stop the stipends, make it that they have to sit for their exams. So then that was started. Then all kinds of problems happened again and again and again. And partly because if you look at the way in which the institution was founded, Warren Hastings was a very interesting person in his own right, and he was a great lover of Persian and Arabic poetry especially. And when he sort of became a powerful person, actually a lot of influential zamindars of the time came and said that one way in which you show that you are a good ruler is by setting up educational institutes. That's our tradition in India, that everyone who wants to be known as a good ruler has to support education, has to support an institution. So you are now ruling us, so you should also do something like that. So they gave a written petition, which is very interesting to read, because they wrote it in Persian, of course. And Warren Hastings himself was very fluent in Persian. He knew Persian, Arabic very well, he knew Sanskrit somewhat. And he actually wanted to also support this. So he said that immediately that the rent collected from 25 villages will be used to start and support the madrasa. So that was how it started. But because there was never any particular vision behind the madrasa, then what was it supposed to be? In the older traditional madrasas, there were very clear objectives that what they were going to teach, for whom they were going to teach, what the students would do once they graduated from there, once they got the certificate or they got the recommendation. So there was a tradition within which those madrasas worked. But when Warren Hastings created this, it was completely sort of out of the blue. He didn't have any idea. The British had no idea about what a madrasa is supposed to be. And also because one of the things that happened was that they had, there was no direct relationship between what was being taught then and the new British colonial structure, though it was still under the East India Company, of course, that what they were supposed to be doing. What would the students learn? What would they do afterwards? So right from the very beginning, there was a problem about the vision of the institution itself. And repeatedly, as I said, you find these problems. One of the things that the Calcutta Madrasa was actually instrumental in, interestingly, was that one of the things that Calcutta Madrasa actually started in India, well, I won't say it started in India, but when in the 19th century, when the British realized that they needed some help, because by that time they were fighting wars all over the subcontinent. And most of the soldiers were of Indian origin. The officers were British, but most of the soldiers, of course, were recruited locally. And what they realized was that a lot of these soldiers were getting injured in battle, and they did not have enough medical people to actually help these soldiers. And to train some people in medical sciences. Now, in those days, as you know, there was also a lot of resistance to the kind of Western medical sciences, because India had its own tradition of Unani and Ayurveda and all of those things. So the first Western medical classes in India were actually held in the Calcutta Madrasa, and what later became the Calcutta Medical College was actually initially part of the Calcutta Madrasa system. So there are very different sort of interesting stories about the way in which these institutions get formed, they are created, and I think that also deeply influences the way in which their history carries on as well. It's not just the past, but these things also influence the way that an institution imagines itself, an institution sees its own duties, and how it tries to give certain values to its students as well. That maybe we are all teaching more or less the same curriculum. But an institution is not just about the curriculum itself. An institution, a university is also about how students, their values, their morals, their way of life, their culture, how that develops as well. An institution can never be just an examination kind of committee where you're just learning something and giving exams and getting a degree. One of the things that is concerning many of us is that there is repeatedly from the government, we are being told that nowadays we should use we have to make use of digital technology so that we can teach more students, and that they will do online courses and they will do online examinations, and the whole idea of campus life, of community will no longer be needed. So the number of students who will get degrees will go up, and the number of teachers will no longer need to be in increased, the infrastructure doesn't need to be increased, because everything will be done digitally, online. I myself think that this is a very wrong idea of what education is actually about. Because education is, as I said, not just about learning something and then in the syllabus of doing an exam and getting a certificate. Education is much more about the campus life itself, about how you learn with your peers, how you learn to interact with your seniors. It's a process. It's something that we all learn and we all enrich ourselves through campus life itself. And I think that some of you are nodding here, that the idea of the campus is a very important idea in the way in which universities work. And every campus is different. You go to a campus, you'll find there are differences. But that is part of what is important, that we all learn about our lives and our adult responsibilities, our duties, as well as our pleasures and everything. We learn about all of this outside the family for the first time. We are within our peers, we have some freedom, we have some kind of interaction. We have our professors who are there, not only, I'm sure many of you go to your professors not only to understand something that they have taught, but also when you have a problem, when you want to discuss something, when you need some advice, maybe about what kind of job you should look for or what you should do in future. But we go to our professors for that, and they know us, so they can give us good advice also. So that the university life itself is something, campus life itself is something that is very, very important. And I think that every institution is extremely important in the idea of what we mean by education, what we mean by what we are trying to do. And I think that this kind of idea that we have needs to be actually focused on more. That education, what is education? Why are there universities? And what is happening to the universities? And I think that all of us together have to begin to rethink this, and the kind of suggestions that we are getting from the government increasingly is something that is very worrisome for all of us. And I think we really need to start thinking about this, talking about this, and defending the university system and the university campus despite all its faults. I don't think that we can replace the university campus life. We can modify it perhaps, but can we really replace it by these sort of what they're calling the massive online course structures that they're telling us to look at? Is that can be a supplement, but can that be a replacement for what we think of as the university experience as a whole? And I'd just like to end here, and I think the mic has been telling me for a long time that I should end, so I'd just like to end here, and as I said, I'm open to questions because I haven't really talked about the whole idea that I've been working on in specific, that is about the relationship between religion and institutions. And it's not just only about Islam also, it's also a larger question, because we know that the missionaries also have many schools and colleges. That there are some which call themselves Hindu universities, so what is happening there, and so on. So it's not just about Islam, but the whole relationship between religion and education, and what does that mean? What is it about the relationship between religion and education, and so on? This is one of the things that I've been trying to understand and look at over the last few years. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Probably a very significant area of research. So from what we heard, I think all of us have some places, either well-formed or at least in a very embryonic form. Hello. Yeah. So, but before we start discussing, before we put questions, I think one small thing needs to be she spoke about madrasas. So in the Kerala context, our madrasa is different. Kerala madrasa is a small school meant for children, say between 6 and 14. In North India and in Bengal, what we call dars or seminary for religious scholars is called a madrasa. In Bengal, last month. That's what called detail. It just whispered. Probably some of you will be wondering what she was talking about. Talked about the madrasa. So it's a madrasa is a seminar. What we call dars. There are quite a few. One in Masjid, another in Amal, another one in Burnani. Quite a few darses here. So that is what she meant by madrasa. Yeah. Questions? Yeah, you can ask in Malayalam also, you can translate.
Just come to our mind, like one is of course Mother Teresa, and recently there was a controversy about Mother Teresa's institution and the kind of things that are taking place there. So, and how do you compare it with madrasas there? So, and what do you say about the kind of controversies? And you also said, since there is a new dispensation there at the center, you are facing some kind of problems. Could you please tell us more about the nature of problems you are facing there at Jadavpur University and Calcutta?
This is a very long story about the situation we're facing, because Jadavpur is sometimes in the news for the right reasons. Recently also the New Times Education ranking that came out, our university is the highest ranked university in India. Above us there are a few IITs, 3 or 4 IITs and IISc and all that, but as far as universities go, we got the highest rank. So we are in the news for these reasons, which are good reasons. But we are also often in the news because we are agitating, we are, our students are agitating. Recently, I was pestered by Arnav Goswami to be on his program because Jadavpur was in the list of anti-national universities for a while. JNU, Hyderabad and Jadavpur. And apparently in JNU, whenever they have the students have some protest meeting or something, they say JNU is in the bad, JU is in the bad. So, we're also on that list as well. So, we are actually in all kinds of lists. So, we have been facing these kind of things, partly because Jadavpur, as I was trying to say, that it has a very radical history. And because of that, it is very interesting that the campus itself is almost entirely left, so to speak, of some shade or the other. There are many shades of left among the students, among the teachers and so on. But there are, so far we have not had, for example, and Jadavpur is a very politically active campus also. We have not had, for example, any BJP or ABVP units on campus. We've not even had, only briefly we had a Trinamool Congress students organization, very briefly, even that didn't last. So it is very, very left, and obviously both the state government and the central government are very anti-left at the moment, so we get targeted a lot, individually and institutionally. So that has been a problem recently. We're talking about our own specific problems, that both the central government and the state government are very, very upset about the fact that we are constantly questioning, challenging, whether it's the educational policy, whether, whatever is coming up, that we are always seem to be against that kind of thing, against the neoliberalization, against the private universities. Our university, we don't want to, our fees are something very ridiculous, like 11 rupees a month or something like that. But, and the government keeps telling us you have to raise the fees. And our students say that no, we will not allow you to raise the fees. So that's one thing, that, that this is for everybody. This university, anybody can come, and we do get students, very bright students from very economically backward areas as well. governments, both state, and we are a state university. So we are directly with the state university, with the state government, and also with the kind of policies that the BJP government is also talking about. They are trying to pursue, or they are trying to impose. See, we get, even though we are a state government, we get a lot of funding from the UGC and from the central government, because we have a very good science technology department faculties as well. So we get a lot of money from the DST and many of the government programs. So they keep using that as try to use that as a leverage. That you are causing too much trouble, then we'll have to think about funding. You're doing this, we have to think about funding. So they use that in a very bad way as well. So we have, I mean, in the political scenario at the moment, we feel very embattled. We feel that there are a lot of issues around. And thank you for clarifying that about the madrasa. Yes, of course, the word madrasa, I'm sure many of you know, means place of learning. It doesn't mean school or anything specific. And at one time, of course, the madrasa everybody used to go for all kinds of education. So that is the history of the whole idea of madrasa, which has changed and it has come to take on certain meanings in certain places as well.
By Swami Vedanta, that's one thing. And secondly, you have said that we started the education, history of education started Calcutta established, at least in the history textbook we learn like that. British established in 1789 Calcutta Madrasa, and there was another called Benares Hindu University. Yes. So
Benares Hindu University, there was another institute.
So did you find any kind of divide and rule propaganda behind that? Because they are touching religion and trying to link education with it. So how do you approach it?
Yeah, thank you. The second question, I think, is a very important question. About Swami Vivekananda, specifically, I have not done work on that, but there has been work which has been done on the Ramakrishna Seva Mission schools. There has been some work of both in English and in Bengali, and which looks at the way in which the followers of Vivekananda, not himself, but how the followers have created a very powerful and interesting network of schools and colleges, and how they teach and what they teach and all that has been done by other people. But the second question I think is very interesting and important, that the Calcutta Madrasa was the first to be established, and then not what now has become the Benares Hindu University, but two other Sanskrit colleges were actually created, one in Benares, one in Delhi. Afterwards, after they created the Calcutta Madrasa. And again, there are a lot of correspondence which you can find, old correspondence about why this was done and why they felt the need to do this. Initially, the kind of, let me say this, just what we were just saying, that initially the division between religions was not really in the sphere of education. Because anybody, a Hindu or these Chinese people used to come from China, Buddhists, anybody would go to either a madrasa or Sanskrit guru's place if they wanted to learn anything. There was no sense that anybody could go or not go. Because these places where that higher education and research took place were actually very open places, and that's true the world over. And even when the Europeans began to come, most of what we now know as European theory actually came from the Arab states. And they actually learned it from there, took it back. I'm sure we all know the history of the zero and all of that, how the zero was, the idea of zero went through from India to Arab to Europe. That before that they used to have that Roman way of writing, which is so cumbersome, and then this whole thing. So then, this whole thing of knowledge and the way in which knowledge circulated was very different in those places. This is something that the British could not understand, because in Britain also they had, education right from the beginning has been associated with religious institutions. Whether it's Oxford or Cambridge, we forget that Oxford and Cambridge were actually set up by churches, and they were funded by churches, and they were meant to create clergymen. Even today, when they, if you get a degree from Oxford or Cambridge, you actually have to kneel down and you have to say those words that I am dedicating my life. If you take the degree officially, then you have to do that. So we actually forget that these so-called Western great institutions are also almost all initially religious institutions. But what happened here was that the British therefore thought that a madrasa was only for Muslim students and Hindu, so we have to create a Hindu Sanskrit college for Hindu students, which actually wasn't the case in the time before the British came. Before they were open and anyone, if they wanted to learn something, could go anywhere. Now what the British thought was that they should be able, they should create, if they're creating something for Muslims, then they have to create something for Hindus also. And also the kind of things that were taught was also divided up. Because in the original pre-British madrasas, largely what was taught was for administrative use. For law, the courts, for land taxes, things like that. Anyone who wanted to learn that would go there. So they would work in the administration. It didn't matter if they were Hindu or Muslim. The most famous example that we always use is that Ram Mohan Rai, one of the early reformers in India, in the Bengal Reformation, he was a student of a madrasa. So it was like that. So you could, if you wanted education, you went to whichever you thought would be. It is the British that in many ways created this division that madrasas are for Islamic education and the Sanskrit colleges are for pandits. So they, in a way, whether knowingly or unknowingly, because I think if you read their correspondence, it seems that they didn't know that actually. Not that they didn't want, I mean, they did it at least initially purposefully. That was what they thought. So they did it like that, but obviously after a while it became a way in which the identity politics of the time also began to play a big role. Because even if you look at something like Hindu College, which later became Presidency College and now Presidency University, even there one of the students who you hear about a lot was Dirozio, who was of course a Christian. So in that sense it was not that these colleges were only meant for certain communities. And you could actually go if you were not also from that community. So like Dirozio went to Hindu college. So that was there. But increasingly what the British policy did was to make these communities separate from one another. Before they were more integrated.
Before the discussion proceeds, just a small intervention. So she's talking about how a communal divide is created. There is a parallel in here, probably many of us are not aware. After the 1921 rebellion, or the Malabar rebellion, a number of schools were started, especially for Muslim students. And those schools were called madrasas, named for Muslim. Parallel to those schools, other schools were named as Hindu schools. So the name has been erased from the side, but it remains in some pockets in Kannur district.
I think we have GMUP schools. The government Mapla operated.
Mapla tag has disappeared, but the Hindu tag has disappeared. The Mapla tag has disappeared. Schools are still called Mapla, UP school, Mapla, not no high schools, only LP and UP schools in various parts of Kerala, Malabar. So where I was born, the name is still there. Government Mapla, whereas the Hindu tag has disappeared. It continues to exist in certain parts. For example, in Mada, in Kannur district, in Vadaga, in the interior part of Vadaga, there is a school which is still called Hindu school in the land. So this is there. I think the policy has been there for quite a long time. And the vestiges of that has not been erased. That is the point.
to contribute something like OVBGNs, for example, the Legends of Kazakh. Madrasa and school are said to be to antagonistic things, like when the school is being set up, he throws studs, throwing tantrums, and he thinks that it's going to be a threat to his very existence and livelihood. I think Mr. Sharif might know more about this. Yeah, in Kazakh, there's in Malayalam, the legend of Kazakh. What happens is there was a madrasa for a long time, and then the government thinks of setting up a school, and then a single teacher school is being set up, and this is being perceived as a threat to the whole madrasa institution. And this, maybe the seeds of a communal kind of hostility is being sown, and this happens. So there was a time, I think, even in Kerala, the madrasa was perceived to be Muslim institutions and schools were seen to be Indian institutions. Regarding my earlier question, about Mother Teresa, because the charge was that, as I said, many of my images of Calcutta was drawn from the book, The City of Joy. And there's a charge that these centers are being, used as centers of proselytization and things like that. And listening to Markandeya Kadru made a very controversial kind of statement. It was a controversial question.
Hindu University, we have Hindu University, we have Christian University, we have Muslim University, and Sanskrit college, such and such. But at the same time, if it comes to Muslim University, as Aligarh Muslim University, it matters. Why does it so? And we know that there is no special reservation for Muslims. There is no such special reservation for any particular community, and especially Muslims. But if it comes to the matter of Aligarh Muslim University, why?
I think everyone knows the answer to that, because one thing that maybe we don't think about it so much. My son went to a St. Xavier's school. Now, I never really thought of it as a Christian school. But once I started this research, then I started thinking that, see, I have no problem sending my son to a Christian school. But if it was a Hindu school, I would say, no, I don't want my son to go to a Hindu school. If it was an Islamic school, I would say, I don't want. But somehow we have before I think we sort of accept that, St. Xavier's school is a good school, so he can go there, he will be a good, he will do well. So, of course, there is this whole image problem that exists, and it's not that I can give you an answer. I think, as I said, everyone knows the answer why that exists, and it's very unfortunate that that exists. Of course, something that I think was reflected on the eve of the Independence Day when Jamia Millia Hostel was raided by the police. I think it's the same thing. There was no reason, there was no news, nothing. But just because it's Jamia Millia institution, the police came, and how can the police come into a campus without, notifying the authorities and coming and, searching the students and all? I don't understand. But of course, there is a whole kind of atmosphere of distrust being created, I think, recently. But about Mother Teresa, I must admit that I have actually, one of my children is adopted from Mother Teresa. We adopted her when she was 6 months old, and now she is 26, so it's a long time. And we had always heard, at that time actually, this was before the Act and the sort of regulation and the Kara and all of that. Practically, Mother Teresa was the only institute in Calcutta that used to give, there was one other, but they were the main institute that used to give children for adoption. And we have heard a lot of stories, that they're asking for money, they will try to baptize, they'll do this, that. My own personal experience has been very, very positive. In fact, other friends or other people I know who went to other institutions were asked for donations. They were told that unless you donate, 5 lakhs, you won't get a child, unless you do this. We were never asked for any money. Only the lawyer's fees we paid to the lawyer.
apart from that, never did anybody ask us for any money. There was no talk of any religion. In fact, when I am a non-practicing anything, so my husband also, but when we went there, we were actually asked questions about our religious belief, to which I started saying that, oh no, we don't follow anything, we don't believe anything. And my husband kicked me and said that, he stopped me and he said that, no, we are very good Hindus, we pray, we do this, we have a, puja in our house and all that. So I said, why did you say all this rubbish? He said, because I got the feeling that the nuns wanted to know that we are religious. Not that we are Christian, because obviously we are not Christian, but they wanted to know that. If you say that no, we don't believe in religion, that will go against you. But if you say that we are, Hindus, we are good Hindus, we pray every day, that is a positive thing. You realize that that was what they wanted to hear. And why were you telling them that you don't believe in all that? Never say things like that to the nuns. So this is absolutely personal. And we used to go because the nuns used to tell us that when the child is older, to bring her back, we feel good because we see the child blossoming, growing up. So we actually used to go there. We have an organization actually which the nuns helped us actually create that. On adoption, we work on legal issues related to adoption. We have a website and so on. It's actually the nuns who called us, those of us who kept in touch, and they said that you should actually form an organization, you should actually do your own thing, completely separate. They never interfere or anything. So personally, I have had a very, very good experience with them. They have asked for our help. Sometimes we have asked for their help sometimes, but never have they ever asked for any money or any donation or any Christian get special thing or something like that. So I don't know about it. I mean, see, we read a lot. I've also read a lot of the articles and books that have come out, which are often very negative. But my own personal experience has always been very positive. So I really don't know whether behind that thing, there was no reason for treating us differently. But we were treated very, very well, I think. Better than a lot of the other adoption agencies, who actually ask for money and they force you to give them money.
What's that daughter of yours doing now?
She's studying, she's in, I have a son who's biological, he's older, and he's studying to be an artist. So he's in Paris at the moment. My daughter is in hotel management, the central government thing, so she's doing her internship now, second year, in Grand Hotel in India. So both of them are doing very, very different things. But she's very, very sweet, very lovely.
മലയാളത്തിൽ കേൾക്കാം. So many questions. I feel like asking hundreds of questions.
Come on, ask me.
Yeah, you can also criticize. This is very much part of it.
Or any comments that you would like to offer of your own experience? അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പറഞ്ഞു കേട്ടതൊക്കെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്വന്തം അനുഭവങ്ങൾ പറയാം.
Just to provoke discussion. Professor Nilanjana Gupta mentioned 1964 as a cut-off year. When major incidents of criminal rights or violations started. So I happened to read a story, not the author's name, it is there in a book called Images Justice and Representation, edited by M. Asaduddin. It's about the life of minorities in India. There are two transcripts of mine, that's why I wrote the title of the book. But I have forgotten the title of the story. It is a Bengal story, which compares our notions of secularism to an old grandfather clock. So, I have forgotten the name of the author. It goes something like this. In the story, there is a father who is little community-minded, although not very explicitly, and he takes an old clock to be repaired, and the watchmaker is a Muslim. So he gets the whole thing done in a couple of days, and it is very big. But there is an altercation between the father and the son, and the father invoking people like Vivekananda is invoked now, and Aravindu tells his son that you have not done anything for Indian tradition. And the son replies, yes, we have demolished the Babri Masjid. This is the kind of thing that goes on in the story. And I think the message is that the kind of Nehruvian secularism is the old grandfather. You think you have prepared it and brought it back to life, but you haven't. That's what I read for the story. So, just by way of provoking discussion.
In Calcutta, yes, there is, of course, in some sections, there is a mistrust or some kind of critique of other communities that is there, which is reflected in the fact that, which I am finding so different in Kerala, so positive here, is reflected in the fact that Calcutta city is divided into Muslim and Hindu, and Christian also, more or less, they have their own religion. And if, say, where I live, it is very, very difficult for any Muslim family to get a house rent. So these things are there, maybe at the, under the surface. But what I was saying about 64 is that after that, at least there has been no sort of overt violence or anything like that. Definitely this mindset is also not good. But on the other hand, I know I have many friends who are married, within different communities, whether Christian or Muslim. That is also quite accepted. I mean, among some people, that's also not a problem. But some cases there is this kind of problem. That is what you are trying to do.
Actually, what I had in mind was the old kind of Nehruvian secularism might be there, but a new kind has taken its place. That's what I was trying to say. Because the left movement, as you say, it sort of came to power partially in 1967 when Jyoti Bose was the deputy chief minister and Ajoy was the renegade, so-called renegade to a Bangla government, separating it from and then afterwards, during the Naxalite movement, its last tentative year to 1975, but Siddhartha Shakabai saw it that it was very severely decimated by 1970. Shooting people with cold blood, all of them. So the point I am trying to make is that after 1964, a new kind of sector, which probably did not believe in the words of religious communities, but which sought to efface the kind of religious identity which existed before 1964. That probably is one thing. It has to be analyzed, logically analyzed. And another thing I remember is Yasmin Khalil's film, Bangladesh, a certain kind of freedom, Swati Islam, which was I think shown here sometime back, Malayalam film, where I think the whole thing is positioned in quite a different way. Because the Bangladeshi movement for independence was something in which both Muslims, the majority community, and the minority community participated fully. And it was a rejection of the idea of partition. And the film underlines this. It's the story of a woman, a Hindu woman, who became destitute after her husband's and children's death, and was brought up, was cared for by a Muslim family. I think the idea still remains in Bangladesh, despite all the fissures that has taken place. And the current Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, is very positive. He has sworn to protect the minority and he has acted as far as I understand. Although she might be under severe pressure from fundamentalists. And recently, some activists of the Jamaat-e-Islami were sentenced to death. Some of them were hanged. Certain others were put behind bars. Especially Ghulam Azad, the leader of the Jamaat-e-Islami during the 1971 war, who openly sided with the area in Pakistan and saw to it that thousands of people were present. These are well-recorded historical events. And Sheikh Hasina's government in clamping down on fundamentalism of this kind, I think is very much acting on the post-1964 kind of secular idea. Although their background is the pre-1964.
Any more questions, please?
Thanks. Nilanjana Gupta about values, value education. She was telling about value without categories and without marks or without branding it. Or value number 1, value number 2, value number 3. As she was talking about secular values and democratic values and so many factors. And we hear from her mouth, from the very first mouth, that reality is related to value education, especially professional education and education of education